before we actually jump into the game. As you see, the game is just now loading up. So, welcome everybody to this first round game in between the Viper and the Beery, two Age of Empires 2 players. Beery is lesser known, but he's a solid, above average player in AoE 2, whereas Viper, of course, the big legend of Age of Empires 2 here. We will have a French mirror here on Dry Arabia. It's only a best of one, so this is a very, very punishing mirror over here, as we discussed before. So, here's the deal with the French, and that's one of the things that needs to be discussed. Most of the time, they age up to Feudal Age with the School of Cavalry, go for Knights. That's just so standard with French. But it also makes them predictable. So you can potentially try to counterpick that later on in the rounds with some civilizations. But for now, it looks like it's just gonna be a very standard French mirror. Viper already sending villagers to the gold. He has 7 on food right now, as it looks like both players are pretty aggressive with their scouting, moving to the middle of the map.
Yeah, of course. Both players going for those early sheep, right?
Absolutely. At this point, you have just enough food on those sheep to pretty much get you to Feudal Age, so you don't have to move out for the hunt, because in Dark Age, walking out to the hunt actually takes quite a lot of your villager time, and it's probably just better to consume 3 or 4 sheep beneath your TC, go up to Feudal Age, and then expand later on. Both of the deer patches for Viper are on the northern side of his base, whereas for Beery, it looks like one of the deer patches is way further away from his town center than the second deer patch is from Viper's TC.
So what, you think that Byri's had a bit of an yeah, wow, that is a... You think, sorry, who do you think's had the unfortunate start here?
I think Beer's map is slightly worse because of this deer patch, but the secondary deer patch doesn't have a super high priority in early game. So you want one good deer patch, and that's gonna be good for quite a while. You see, each deer is 350 food, and you have 7 of them. So this is about 2,500 food lying around over here. You don't necessarily need the second patch of deer immediately. The bigger question is the gold mines, I believe, which I think Beery has a pretty bad one off. Front gold mine over here, whereas for Viper, it's actually much more defendable. You see, it's closer to the TC, it's on the right side of his base, and it's even somewhat sheltered by a forest. Viper already opening with the School of Cavalry here. It's a pretty fast Feudal Age here. 2.5 minutes into the game, he's going up.
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of people are asking in chat about the nature of this. Of course, it is just a best of one, so, you know, it is... Players are going to be unfortunate when you get a worse map. That's just part of the gamble of playing a tournament like this. I do see in the meantime that both players are aging up with 3 villagers on their School of Cavalry. Is that what you were expecting to see?
From Viper, he's playing very standard, but Beery is doing something entirely different. First of all, he went for 2 lumber camps, which is something you can afford with French because you got a discount on your lumber camps. And he's going for full spearmen. This is something I was referring to when I said that you can sort of counterpick the French here, simply because it's so predictable that they go for the School of Cavalry that you could go directly on spearmen and potentially fight off those early knights. Now, the problem here is that these will be Dark Age spearmen, and am I going to see towers here? Because it's very possible that Beer will try to play this one with spearmen forward. You see, if you look at Beer's resources, he's very far from Feudal Age here, so this is pretty much gonna be all Dark Age aggression from him. If we look at his POV, he has scouted Viper's Goldmine, he even sees the School of Cavalry, and I wonder if he wants to stop that before it's finished. That would be next to impossible, and it looks like it's just gonna be a tower rush on the goldmine. Ooh.
So our first prediction has already turned out to be incorrect. That we are seeing a bit of, well, I don't know if we'll call it gimmick, but unconventional France play, which we were expecting to see some night-on-night action, and this is very much not going to be some night-on-night action. Look at this. This is incredible. So I think, is it fair to say, Lidakor, you'd agree with me that I think Byri, knowing that he's outmatched on pure skill, has felt he needs to do something a bit special to have a chance, and he's just going for it.
Yes, I think part of that is indeed that he thinks that if he just plays a flat-out Night War, Viper would beat him, but it's also just counterpicking the obvious strategy. This could go against any player, basically, in the game, just saying, okay, my opponent is going Knights, I'm gonna try going Spearmen. The problem here is that Beer doesn't have a whole lot of Spearmen here, and you see those Knights actually do quite a lot of damage against Dark Age Spearmen. if Beery was in Feudal Age with Hardened Spearman, it would be slightly better. And you see, Viper had to evacuate that gold mine, so he's relocating his villas to this one. Here come the Spearmen, and Viper might have gold control issues. He's only at 38 gold, so he might not be able to make a lot of knights here.
And he's got a couple of those spearmen already on top. The villagers are actually choosing... Are they choosing to take the fight? I think they were choosing to momentarily take the fight there. So, is that... Yeah, we're seeing some units already starting to drop, but it looks like the Viper has just about repelled this early Dark Age aggression. What are you thinking?
I think it did. The problem here is that the Spearmen take a lot of time to get to the other side, and you see, Viper even has a scout hidden in this stealth forest to see the enemy movement. If Beery was in Feudal Age with his Spearmen, this would be way better, because that's a pretty big power spike for him, for his spears. These Dark Age spears are just so underwhelming. It's 6 attack, even with the bonus attack against cavalry, these knights are pretty tanky if you consider the charge attack, and Beery's entire strategy is based on denying the gold from Viper, which I don't think that he's gonna be able to do now. You see, the knights charge in, and half of the HP for the spearman is gone.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, it looks like one knight just about 4 shots the spearman there, which is just, when you consider that's a direct counter, it's pretty incredible. But, I mean, even now looking at this fight, Viper choosing not to take it, but I think we've seen a number of spearmen already go down, whereas, you know, the Viper's continued growing his eco behind this Dark Age rush. Certainly looking pretty strong. I'm seeing some GGs in the chat, not quite sure we're there yet, but Viper will certainly be likely pretty happy with this start.
Well, he's out of gold right now, and that archer range is being delayed quite heavily. If the range goes up, Beery is in trouble, because archers can deal with his spearmen quite easily, but it's not like Viper has a huge amount of knights left over here. He's trying to pull them back. He doesn't have the chivalry upgrade yet for healing, so it's gonna take some time until he can heal them, but Beery needs to find a way to Feudal Age.
Can we take a look at, are we at Beery's resources as well? He's pretty far. He's got 12 villagers on food now. He's got the gold that he needs to age up, but pretty far from aging up. I mean, has he done enough damage in Feudal, in your opinion, for that?
Absolutely not. It's just insufficient here. I like the idea behind this one, but the thing is that the fact that I see farms is very disappointing, problematic for him, because now he's stuck in Dark Age. See, he's at 60 in food right now, and now he's facing archers. He just simply has no answer to that. And the farms need a lot of time to pay off, so you really want to avoid getting farms out in Dark Age as Viper is coming in on the gold miners of Beery. As much as I think that Beery's idea was good here, it was just not enough against Viper, and now those knights will start to punish Viper also as archer support to back them up, so it's gonna be next to impossible for Beery to hold his base. And you see, he keeps trying to tower rush that wood line as well, but it's just not gonna happen. Viper will be able to take down the tower, and now the knights will just tear apart the economy of Beery.
In the meantime, I think with some breaking news, I'm seeing a lot of RIP Drongos in the chat and a huge raid coming in from Drongo, which is slightly unexpected. I guess his losses are game, but we're going to have to wait. We'll wait till after this game. We'll continue finishing off this game, but some interesting news. We did say part of this tournament is that you don't know who you're running into to the first round. So for all we know, I mean, if Drongo has lost, I mean, he might have just run into an absolute beast and end up, you know, with some, maybe whoever has overcome Drongo is going to go pretty deep in this tournament. Drongo, very, very strong player, been doing very well recently, so going to have to assume that he's been beaten by a very decent player. But I'm going to let you go back to this game for now, and we'll talk about that after.
So Beery actually managed to get a second tower up here, and I'm not saying it's ideal for Viper that he's pulling 20 villas to take this down. I understand the concept, and now what I'm seeing is that Viper is gonna have some food issues here, unless he moves out for a patch of berries or something like that, because, you see, most of his villas are on berries right now, and finally he can move towards the deer. Beery is on the way to Feudal Age though, so it looks like he survived, and the way that he should play this one is with defensive towers and a lot of spearmen, because the towers would prevent the archers from picking off the spears, and you can just try to play a defensive game, hope that you can even this out. This is the best situation for Beery right now. He knows he's behind, but maybe if the game becomes a long game, there's a chance for a comeback.
I mean, I'm seeing that that score differential does not make pretty reading if you're Beery. I think it's fair to say in the early game that is on the right of the screen. That's a huge score gap. Could we take a look maybe in the top left at the resource production, the ongoing resource production? I'd just be curious to see if on a minute by minute basis, Beery's managing to kind of stay up, and not really is the answer.
He will be fine once the spearmen come in here to secure the gold mine, but this is where that gold mine being exposed is a serious problem. And remember that now Viper has Chivalry, so he can just disengage, heal up the knights, and then come back even stronger. Looking at the resources of Viper, that's actually almost Castle Age resources. I think he's now at least 1, but potentially 2 steps ahead.
So if you're Beery in this situation, I mean, what is your potential route back into the game, if any? I mean, if you're putting yourself in his shoes, like what can he consider doing at this stage to give himself any hope at all?
I'm always trying to be positive. I would say that there isn't really too much of a hope for him right now. We talked about how punishing a French mirror is. In general, mirror civilization matchups can be problematic simply because, you know, you're doing the very same thing in the long run as your opponent is, and if he's just doing it better, then you will fall behind. So, I feel like at this point, the only thing that Beery can hope in is that Viper makes a mistake. Like maybe charging him with the cavalry, running into Spearman, or potentially Beery can get a good raid with like 3 or 4 knights, killing some Veils. That's his best hope.
Thing is, I would say I'm seeing a lot of criticism of Beery, you know, in the chat, in terms of, you know, going so unconventional, not going French knights. But I have to say, even if it's not worked out and it's not working out, when you know you're at a significant skill gap in a mirror, I mean, I do think that your best percentage play is trying something unconventional, and there is no shame in having a skill gap when you're coming up against, I mean, the greatest Age of Empires player of all time. I mean, greatest Age of Empires 2 player, perhaps, you know, greatest across the entire franchise of all time. I kind of appreciate and respect that he's had to try and do something very unconventional and different to give himself, you know, even the tiniest hope. It looks like it's not working out, but
Nope.
I think you can justify the rationale.
Nope, that's the end of the story. He needed a defensive tower on the wood line, simply because if he has a tower out there, he can use that to garrison the villas, pick off the archers potentially. Now, even if he isn't losing villagers, it's gonna come down to idle economy. 14 villagers idle for the whole time, and you see he's just now grabbing Chivalry, whereas Viper is up to Castle Age. In fact, he's going up to the Royal Institute, which is the landmark you use if you're playing more aggressive. He could get Cantled Saddles immediately to boost his knights. And now he just needs the Castle Age upgrades, and he should be all good to go. Beery feels like he needs to fight right now, otherwise he's just gonna get beaten by Castle Age units.
Yeah, I mean, the more of these units that go down, when you take a look at those current resources, the ongoing production, just how much sooner the Viper got up to Feud at the beginning of the game, I mean, at this point, it looks like Beery probably knows that the game may well be over, but he's, you know, trying to hang on in there. You would think if this was a ladder game, he may well have resigned by now, but being a big tournament, he's at least going to try and sneak around and see if there's a way for him to kind of pull this back somehow.
It's difficult to say, because one thing we shouldn't forget is that we are seeing the entire map and Beery doesn't. In fact, we don't even have score for the players to see. We are seeing the scores in the spectator overlay, but the players can't see that while playing. So one of the biggest criticisms when it comes to no score in games is that the players just don't know if they are behind by a lot. And if Beery looks at this, he would maybe say, okay, it's a little too much. Now, I like what he's doing right now, so he's trying to raid Viper, and that's probably his ticket back into the game. He needs to play a very, very long game here to make this work.
Yeah, it is a good point. It's something that was discussed a lot in the early days of the game, whether or not the lack of score would be a good or a bad thing. Certainly, I think it's fair to say strategically it's quite interesting because it changes the way you appreciate the game, but it does, like you said, perhaps extend games somewhat. In the meantime, a big Night Rush coming in there from the Viper looked to be pretty effective.
I feel like since Viper already has an archer range, he could actually mix in a couple of Arbaletier, because right now he's mostly facing Spearmen and Knights. Against the Spearmen, his archers work fine, but even just a couple of crossbows in Castle Age will just destroy whatever Beery has. And the problem for Beery is that he's just sort of stuck in Feudal Age, because he's not gonna get up to Castle Age anytime soon.
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, just taking a look at the map, Viper starting to exert a bit more map control here as well. It does look a little bit problematic. Like we said, I mean, I think I think we know if Barry could see the score, I think he might be calling. But it is a very good point that you made, that people will forget when watching this that he just doesn't know that he's that far behind. It's very hard to know. We see a villager doing a bit of a dance there at the top of the screen. A nice little raid there from Beery, trying to get himself back into the game. One villager goes down, perhaps a second. No, he's going to pull back. So just the one villager goes down. But he's got his knights caught. They took a little bit of damage there. So they maybe hung around attacking that archery range a second too long.
Looks like Beery is still hanging on to this one. Currently he's at 43 vills. Viper is at 45 though, so... Oh, that's actually a nice one. That's a very, very nice one from Beery over here. He might be able to take down a couple of archers here. But, yeah, the other side of the map, he just doesn't have a defense against Castle Age units, and now these Veteran Royal Knights are actually Castle Age units. And if you consider the fact that the French Royal Knights get a bonus damage after they charge in, it just makes it even more difficult for Beery to fight this one. And at this pace, Viper is just going to grind down his economy.
Yeah, we see another villager dropping there. And I think another 2 villagers might have actually dropped there. And he's not moving those villagers. He's taking the fight. So Viper's now, he took down a knight and a couple of villagers. That was really, I mean, if it wasn't looking brutal before, it's starting to look incredibly messy.
Yeah.
Now he's really got himself in right down into the base. And I think from this point, you can just spam knights into the base repeatedly, and they just don't stop coming in.
Yep. I 100% agree. In fact, since Viper has a range, he could just get the infantry siege upgrade, and he could make rams with the archers. 2 or 3 battering rams would level the base of Beery right now. It's not like Beery can do anything else, to be honest. He's got 20 idols inside the town center, no gold income. This is just one of those games where, you're sitting there as a player and like, okay, is there any way for me to get back into the game? But really, it's just slowly falling out of your control. You see, he's trying to raid his way back, but that's already double the score for the Viper.
Yeah, and I do sympathise with Beery hanging on in this. I mean, I know, unfortunately, you do get to the point in the game where a lot of people in chat kind of imploring a resignation to look at other games, but you sympathise. It is a huge tournament. There's $20,000 on the line. He doesn't know he's quite that far behind, so I personally wouldn't, be quite as harsh on that. I mean, you put yourself in his perspective, and you just don't know. You feel that your opponent might also be under some pressure. It's really, really difficult to know that it's it's quite that bad. I see people asking in chat if the AoE4 score is reliable. It is generally reliable, though there are some issues. I think it's with the Mongols, in which the packing up buildings causes score issues. But this score is pretty accurate. I think it's a pretty fair reflection on the state of the game.
I feel like we don't even need to look at the score to evaluate the state of the game, because currently, Viper is just smashing the economy of Beery. If we look at it, Viper is actively killing vills, whereas Beery isn't really able to touch Viper's eco. He picks off a villager every once in a while, but that's it, and I think if that is not GG, then I don't know what is. And indeed, there goes the game. Viper moves on to the second round, taking down Beery.
Well, that was pretty. Can we call that imperious form from Viper? I mean, he looked. There was a skill match, but he looked very, very strong now. So just to let you guys know what's going to happen, as was always the plan, in the coming minutes, Aussie Drongo is going to be taking over from myself and joining Lidakor for the remainder. And I may come and say hello at the very end of the stream, or perhaps between games, but certainly during the games, it's going to be Mr. Drongo and Lidakor taking you from here. Perhaps he will be able to give a a little bit of an insight into what happened while we consider what game's going to come next.